speaking of adaptation and building of infrastructure, Alice, I wanted to ask you, I covered the First Street report this week, and one thing that jumped out at me was, the point being made that the government's current precipitation estimates don't capture what's actually happening any longer as the climate changes. But also that this comes at a time when the nation is pouring, hundreds of billions of dollars into new infrastructure. We know that NOAA is working on estimates that will factor in climate change, but those are some years away from completion. And I just wonder, do you worry that we are going to end up in this moment that we're in building roads or bridges, stormwater systems, and other infrastructure that might not really be adequate for the climate of the future or the climate of the present, for that matter?
There is a huge risk that we will take this once in a generation amount of money and spend it in a way where we don't build the bridge high enough for the floodwaters. The road doesn't have a wide enough drainage ditch to accompany the extreme precipitation that falls. We base our building practices here in the United States on model building codes. Those model building codes also rely on the calculations of past rain that we've had. So those model building codes, even if they're the latest codes, do not yet reflect the future risk. But here in the United States, because of the way we're set up and the decisions about how and where building occurs rests with state or local governments, more than half the states, 40-some states, have a very low level of code that's disaster resistant. And that's to the events that occurred in the past, not the events in the future. And we're also seeing much greater development in coastal areas. 40% of our population lives in a county along the coast. That's only 10% of the landmass, but that area is vulnerable to bigger, more intense storms, as well as sea level rise. And then we're seeing just lots of people moving into this wildland urban interface, which faces much higher wildfire risk, and they are also vulnerable. And then we're going to have infrastructure that's built to outmoded standards. And also, we don't have good vulnerability assessments yet on a community-wide basis about what these future risks will look like as we made the choices about where infrastructure should be placed. Should we even be building a bridge there? That's a fundamental question in the face of climate changing. But we don't have that kind of information for the communities to be able to work off of. Maybe a wealthy community does, but many of our communities simply don't have that kind of planning expertise or access to it to be able to make the wise choices with these dollars that are coming very, very quickly with a lot of pressure to spend them.